Well, the gang's all here. Let's get going.
Yeah,
Hello,
sorry.
Helen.
Sorry, I shouldn't have been late because I was here, but here I am now.
Excellent. Oh, Utsinga Wines. Hi. Hope your vintage is going well. Well, let's get started. This week we're visiting Kelvedon. It's one of the original farms. 10,000 acres were given to Francis Cotton in 1830. The same family is still on the farm. We're on the 6th and 7th generations. And the thing about this farm, next week we'll do another old farm, Springvale, similar sort of story to that point. But this one then gets really different because this one was settled by Quakers. What that meant was that their farmhouse became the first Quaker meeting house in the Southern Hemisphere, and we still have the only Quaker school in the Southern Hemisphere down in Hobart. And historically, apparently, it all gets tracked back to this Cotton family. I had a group of people who'd been to the Friends School in doing wine tasting one day, and they went, yes, it all goes back to this Cotton family. That's what they teach us in the history of the school.
Yeah,
so
just a bit of information about that. So Jack, who's at Kelvedon now, is 5th generation Cotton. So what was the original Cotton? What was his name?
Francis Cotton. Now,
Francis.
you remember
So
last
Francis
week,
Cotton.
he also surveyed Liz Dillon, which ended up
Francis
in
Cotton. Francis Cotton came out with Francis Cotton came out with 2 other guys from England. Now the other guys were actually the Quakers. They had been sort of discommunicated in England and decided to spread their wares elsewhere. Francis Cotton was a Quaker, but he had married, I think it was Maria Ann, and she was a lapsed Quaker. So he got discommunicated from the Quakers because he went outside. So when they arrived in Australia and found the land at both Liz Dillon and Kelvedon and settled around Swansea, the three families sort of settled around Swansea, and that's how it started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Where did
they literally were the first Quakers in Australia. And so then they that was sort of back in whatever year that was, 1830.
Yeah.
And then they didn't actually make a formal connection to the Quaker Society, also known as the Religious Society of Friends, until about 1962.
Oh, really?
So the formal connection with that was a lot later. But they
they claimed it in retrospect.
Well, the formal connection was with the Quakers in England, back in England, but they were running their own show here anyway, including the development of the Friends School.
Yeah, so the Tasmanian connection developed from those 3 families and built a strong community, which we still have here today.
That's
but they
right.
That's kind of an interesting bit of information, because I wouldn't have thought that the Quakers would excommunicate anybody.
Yeah, no, they were.
They
were quite.
My memory of them. For those of you who are sitting there and saying, "What's a Quaker? What are they raving on about this week?" Well, it's more of a philosophy of life. They are pacifists, which meant that on Kelvedon, while some of the other farmers were out shooting Aboriginal people for sport, the Cottons on Kelvedon were protecting them on the property. And so that fit with their Quaker philosophy. I remember when I was a street outreach youth worker, this is a new bit of information.
I noticed that you've changed that description from being a street worker, which is what you always say. Well, now we're a street outreach worker, because people might get confused.
That may yet come, depending on what happens with COVID and the return of the tourists, although I'm not sure what sort of market there'd be in Bicheno.
Oh, dear.
No, I was the first female street worker working with girls on the streets who were at risk. And I worked to a committee of every denomination, really. There was a committee of 12, and they represented every church group, including the Quakers. And they all put in money to get this community group going and employ me as the first female outreach street worker. And I'll never forget, I had to go around to all these churches and talk about the work that we were doing and sort of justify them and get them to continue to donate to the program. Bicheno beach worker.
Thanks, Andrew.
I look like a beached whale, I think, on the beach. Thanks, Andrew. Anyway, I went along to various churches and we did the services, and then I give my little talk, and I went along to the Friends. Now, they don't have a church. They don't have a hierarchy. They have a round building, and it's called a meeting house. And I sat there with all the other Quakers from Hobart. And then someone stood up and said, I just want to share that the blue sky and the cloud rolling by is really beautiful. And that's so non-hierarchical. Everybody stood up and did their own thing. And at a certain point they said, okay, we've got a guest this week who's going to give us a little talk. And I did my thing. But gee, it was a wonderful experience to engage on that level with the Quaker movement.
But it is true, their values are very much about resolution of conflict, integrity, community, and equality, and that's the way they stand. They do actually believe in God. They are sort of based on Christian values, but they don't believe in the structure of a formal church. So so they're an interesting lot. There's only 1,000 Quakers in Australia.
Wow. Yeah,
but there's another 1,000
North American English sort of movement, isn't it, really?
There's another 1,000 that sort of come in and come out. They're not sort of formal members, but there's 1,000 formal members.
Well, thank goodness the Cotton family and their friends came to Tasmania.
Absolutely. All right, let's get on to some wine.
Yeah, I mean, people often say, oh, Quakers, they don't drink, do they? Well, all the Quakers I know do. And we've had some very good times. But there is a beautiful piece of dressmaking down in the museum down in Swansea. I'll never forget that. Have you seen that, Helen?
I don't recall.
It was a jacket of, I think, Francis cotton.
Wow.
And it's beautiful fabric and beautifully made. Absolutely simple. They don't believe in any sort of adornment and fancy cuffs and collars.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Fantastic.
That was probably made by Maria Ann, Francis's wife at the time.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because Anne has the name Anne is sort of followed right through the cotton generations as well. And currently, the Jack's daughter Anna is working with Jack at Kelvedon and doing lots of things.
She's absolutely passionate about the farm. Now, we did actually live there for a little while, so we did get to know a little bit about it. We learnt how the farmers really love their sheep, and we learnt a bit about what farms do apart from wine. In 1998, Jack diversified the family farm, which had traditionally been merino sheep and cattle. Super fine merino wool, because of course the lower the rainfall, the finer the wool, because the sheep don't have the energy to thicken the wool. So you starve them and keep them cold and you get really super fine merino wool, apparently. Someone was telling me the other day. Anyway, he put in 1 hectare of vines and got the first vintage of Pinot Noir in 2002. So we're 18 vintages on. Added Sauv Blanc some years later. It went so well, that first planting of Pinot. He's now extended to 9 hectares all up. So it's a medium-sized place. Interestingly enough, the vines right next to the road as you go past Kelvedon Beach after Spiky Bridge are the ones that go into the Kelvedon brand. But there's a couple of other vineyards on site. Almost half of what they grow there is sold to Accolade Wines and goes into the very prestigious Arras.
House of Arras.
Of Arras. Into the Blanc de Blanc and the Grand Vintage usually. And those grapes are these. It's a single clone grape, which I think from my research may have been brought to Australia in 1969. Bit of a French history, I think. We were told that Hardy's brought this grape clone into Australia to have it grown on contract to go into Eileen. They're quite prestigious Chardonnay. Anyway, the Chardonnay's been around for since 2015. And I think there might be two versions of the Chardonnay, the one that's made from the single clone and then another version which is very lightly oaked. But this one is a traditional style for the dedicated Chardonnay lover. Now, this is really quite interesting for Helen and I because we're not, have to admit it,
we're not dedicated
big Chardonnay drinkers. However, on tasting, non-Chardonnay drinkers often like this, and the people that like a good traditional Chardonnay with the touch of oak or the heavy oak also like this. So it's an incredibly broadly appealing Chardonnay. So Helen, let's see how we go.
Okay. It's quite fresh.
It's really fresh. It's not heavy at all, is it?
No.
It's got a nice
lightness
to it.
I think I can pick up a little bit of oak in it, which is heavily oaked Chardonnays. It just doesn't fit my palate. But I can fit up a little bit, but I can taste a little bit of the oak. But it just sort of almost gives it a mellowness. It's it's lovely.
It is. It's very easy to drink, I have to say. People that know more than us say that it's elegant, and I'd agree with that. It's a perfect balance of citrus, stone fruit flavours and toasty scent of French oak. And the flavours linger on the palate.
Excellent. The other thing that we didn't say about Kelvedon was about with their super fine merino wool. Most of it is sent to Italy to be turned into fine Italian woolen suits. And a number of years ago when we were living in Swansea, so that's going back 10 years, Kelvedon actually won the Zegna Award, which is a well sought after award given by the firm in Italy. So that's sort of a claim to fame.
The Zegna get a lot of wool from Tasmania. So it's quite possible, just taking that to a logical conclusion, it's quite possible that Kelvedon wool went to Italy to Zegna, was made into suits that Paul Keating wore.
That's right. We always talk about that because he liked his Zegna brand.
Yes.
And the other thing,
small world.
I was talking to Jack. I couldn't talk to Jack today, but I was talking to his youngest daughter, Em, and she was telling me that they're in the middle of shearing at the moment. So they've just harvested. They've finished that. They've been pruning their vines, and then they've gone straight into shearing. So it's a full-on life down at that farm. But the other thing about the shearing is that they're shearing those sheep in exactly the same shearing shed that they were shearing sheep back in the early 1800s. And they think that it might be the oldest operating shearing shed in Australia. So that's pretty cool to have on the East Coast.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when we sold the left bank that we had in Swansea, we had nowhere to live and nothing to do. So the reason we ended up living at we had nowhere to live. Anyway, Jill Cotton at Kelvedon at the time said, well, we've got this little 1800s cottage. Would you like to come and stay on Kelvedon for a while? So we lived there for, I think, about 10 months in this 1800s cottage, which used to be used to transport convicts, I think, who were on their way to Maria Island.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so it was right next to the shearing shed. Do you remember where after they'd sheared, the sheep would be all around the house?
Yeah, I do remember.
Smelly little buggers. Almost as smelly as the penguins in Bicheno.
Right.
Yeah, but it was a fantastic experience to live there and to experience a working farm. Yeah. All right.
What about the Pinot, Subi? I'll just finish this one.
Oh, I have to. They were shearing sheep at Kelvedon today. Annika Tadima has passed there, and she had to stop for the shorn sheep to get across the road.
Oh, excellent!
Fantastic. So we're not telling fibs. I've got a little bit of wasabi cheese from Ashgrove. to just stimulate a little bit more on the palate with that.
This is my gourmet nibbles today, I'm afraid. I'm letting the team down this week. I've been okay in the last few weeks, but we're back into just chips, which I quite like, so that's okay.
Nothing wrong with that.
That's right.
Now, just one last thing about sheep and wine. It's, according to Jack, a perfect partnership. And certainly, just after all the grapes were picked around here, quite a number of vineyards had sheep grazing in them. Of course, they were keeping the grass down, but they were also fertilising as they went.
I was going to say, providing some manure.
And sheep do.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah. So it's a great partnership. So,
excellent. Oh, I better put some in mine.
Yeah, I've had mine here for a while. Yes,
so,
everybody.
Sorry, once again, if people haven't seen us before, apologise about the back to front sort of language on the labels, but we haven't figured out how to deal with that, so we all live with it.
No, but yeah.
Wow, the colour's quite different to the other Pinots that we've been doing lately. It's it's almost a cherry colour.
Look, it is. It's quite a light texture, this vintage, but it seems that about every second year we have more rain, we get more grapes, they get more wine, so they're happy. The intervening years we have less rain, they get smaller grapes that are tighter and more intense, so we get less wine, but it has sort of more body because it's not as diluted. So, well, that we don't know about these things, but that's what we think we've observed. That's our theory.
It is quite a light Pinot, but it's got some really interesting flavour. I feel like I say that quite often, but it really does. Its lightness doesn't match the flavour in the mouth because it's not light in the mouth. It's lovely.
It's full in the mouth. It's full in the mouth.
Yeah.
It's got black cherries and dark
full
chocolate.
Of cherries.
And I need to get a bit of dark chocolate to have with it. Because
nice.
A bit of cuvee chocolate with this would be fantastic. Hi, Penny Ruthberg. Love those brooches I unpacked today. Have some new brooches from Penny Ruthberg Dog Studio.
I saw them
in the farm shed.
Dog brooches. They look fantastic.
They are so cute. Anyway,
can't wait to see them in real life in a couple of weeks. Won't be long.
So it's got a fine balance of tannins and French oak that creates a wine that is full of intense layers of flavour that remain on the palate.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's absolutely true. I mean, we did a few vertical tastings of Kelvedon Pinots.
Just hold on for a minute. Oh, you keep going. I've got to go.
And yeah, it was just fantastic to try them, although the next day was a bit shabby. So glad we're not there doing 18 in a row. But I do have a little bit of truffle cheese. I've got a little bit of truffle cheddar to go with my Pinot.
Nice.
And on closer inquiry, I found some information. Well, I actually found these wines on a place called Tas Gourmet online. Over 500 products from 60 producers, set up by a man called Duncan Garvey, whose predecessors came out on a ship in 1825. So he's sixth generation himself. It turns out that Duncan first established the first French truffle, black truffle. He established the first French black truffle.
He planted it?
Yeah.
He planted it. Yeah, right.
Or
dug it up.
In June 1999. So thank you, Duncan.
Right. Wow.
Because truffles are such a sensational
and Tasmanian truffles are famous all around the world. They're sought after and famous.
Yeah, well, Tas Gourmet online, they post all around the world. So
yeah, right.
Fantastic. Well,
fascinating. Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? It's quite Moorish, actually. You just want to keep drinking it.
very Moorish.
That's what I think about the Kelvedon. That's about as sophisticated as I get. I just want to
Moorish is good. I better
All
stop.
right. What else have we got to say, Subi?
Well, just to recap that this is week 8. We started at the southern end of the wine region down at Brim Creek at Marion Bay. We're heading up to the northernmost vineyard. There are 22 producers in the region, as we all know by now. The most northern is Priory Ridge up in St Helen, so that's where we'll end up. But where are we going next week, Helen?
Well, I understand that we're going to Springvale, but interestingly enough, Milton comes before Springvale, so I'm not sure if I've got that right. Well, you have a little chat, and I'll just have a look, and I'll let you know.
We're now in the sort of heart of the East Coast wine region. There is a concentration of vineyards in the area between a bit south of Swansea to a bit north of Bicheno. We're certainly in the heart of the region here. If you want to check out any of these wines, they're all online in our little shop. You can have a look at them, give us a ring if you want to talk about wine anytime, or gin or whiskey for that matter. We've just reintroduced tastings at the farm shed, so it's fantastic to be back in action with that. Gradually easing our way into the new normal. Still Monday to Friday, 10 till 4. But hope to see you there soon. Helen's going to tell us where we're going next.
Yeah, no, we're going to Springvale, and then we're coming back to Milton.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to Craigie now.
Craigie
and the Bend, and then we're coming back to Gala. So it's a little out of order, but that doesn't matter. They're all
Gala.
Yeah, Gala.
Gala.
So
yes.
they're all. It's a little bit out of order in that whole what's it called?
Well, we're all in this together.
Yeah, where do they live? Gala?
Cranbrook.
Cranbrook, thank you.
Cranbrook. Yeah.
I've just had a blank. Yeah, so in Cranbrook. So
they are all very close.
So we're moving into all the vineyards around the Cranbrook area. So Springvale next week we're doing a rosé and a Pinot, I think.
Well, yes. Now that's interesting because we have some.
Thank you, Andrew.
Most of our rosés are made from Pinot Noir grapes. I just got one in from Hurley Burley that's made from Cab Sav grapes, and the one that we're tasting next week from Springvale is made from Shiraz grapes.
I know. I'm excited about that.
Excellent.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, Karen. Glad you enjoyed the stories. Lovely to see you all again.
Thank you, everybody,
also for the 400 odd people that watch this after the live show. Lovely to meet you. Thanks for joining us. We love East Coast wines. We hope that we can help you to love them too.
Yeah, okay. And another couple of weeks, and I should be sitting next to you in Bicheno, Subi.
Excellent. That will be very nice.
I know. I think you're happy about that. I don't know about anyone else in Bicheno, but I'll be there soon.
I think we've gone over time now, so we better sign off.
Okay. See you later. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining in.
Thanks, Rhonda.
Bye-bye.
So glad you
Thanks, Rhonda.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rhonda. See you, everyone.